And our final speaker for today has come all the way across from New Zealand to be with us, and I noticed that she's been scribbling madly and taking lots of notes, so I hope that she's learnt something today, nodding madly. Sharon is the long-serving Executive Officer of the Council of Social Services in Christchurch. Now, the Council of Social Services in New Zealand operates a bit differently from that in Australia, and I'm not sure whether Sharon will touch on that, but if anyone's interested, you can ask her later. And Sharon's role is really involved in consistently advocating for social justice and well-being, and for the not-profit sector as a vital part of community well-being. As we can all recall, I'm sure, in September 2010, a major earthquake with a magnitude of 7.1 struck the South Island of New Zealand. Following that was a major magnitude 6.3 aftershock in February 2011. This aftershock caused widespread destruction and damage across Christchurch, injured almost 4,500 people and caused the deaths of 185. The central city and eastern suburbs of Christchurch were completely ravaged. An estimated 10,000 houses required demolition and over 100,000 were damaged. So the scale of that is really almost beyond our comprehension, I think, and really a very, very devastating event. Following the earthquakes, Sharon was instrumental in ensuring that not-for-profit groups were recognised and supported for their grassroots work in communities and their ability to connect with and support vulnerable and marginalised groups. She continues to promote the unique contribution that the not-for-profit sector can make to emergency management and planning. I'm really pleased to welcome Sharon. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Hi everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come here. I'd really love to acknowledge that warm welcome this morning from Colin Hunter and acknowledge that I am standing on the lands of the Indigenous people of the Wurundjeri and pay my respect to the elders both past and present. When we go on to a marae in New Zealand, we know that we're bringing our ancestors with us, and the first sound you hear is the woman from the host tribe calling both people visiting and their ancestors to come and mix with their ancestors. And I know my ancestors have come with me today, and also my colleagues from Christchurch. There was a lot of people really envious of me being able to come over and learn from you today. And it's been really exciting making that connection with Victoria Cross and with Bridget, because after the quakes, the first thing I did was went on the internet to find out what the role of the not-for-profit sector could be in a disaster recovery and how the sector could work. And I really struggled to find anything. That the sector was really invisible in disaster recovery. So it's been really great to be able to share information and to find ideas and learn from everybody here. My notebook was really full, so I'm all keen and eager to get home and share with things. I'd just like also to, when I say bringing my ancestors and my colleagues with me, I'm going to present soon this book of ours, Holding Hope Together, and just read from the upoko of Otutahi Runaka, our local Māori organisation that we work with. Our tribe is calling to the people who have just set foot on this marae. Bring with you the memories of all our dead and so many tears spilling forth nationwide. Look at our people working across the land, spread out far and wide. Shaking is the ground, quivering is the sea. Oh, the love and pain within me, the ground shakes and quivers. And I just want to pay my respects to the people who were lost in your bushfires, and also to the commitment of the people that came over to New Zealand to help our lot. You sent emergency management people, police, and it was just great having you there for us. Right, as I said, I struggled to sort of find a role for the not-for-profit sector, and we've been really pushing to make sure that the sector is recognised. So one of the things I was able to do was to organise with our local community radio, Plains FM, and we had a series of programs in which I invited in the managers of various not-for-profit groups and interviewed them about who they were, their organisation was, what they did, and how the earthquake had affected them and what their new role was. And it seemed such a shame to lose those recordings that we arranged to get them transcribed, and then with the help of the Christchurch City Council we turned them into a book. So we've got the stories of about a dozen not-for-profits, and I'd just really like to introduce you to them all. First of all is Tony from the Pacific Trust. The Pacific Trust is a health provider, primary health care, and also wraparound services, because Pacific people typically come, not just the one individual who needs the health care, but the family comes too. So Pacific Trust takes the opportunity to enrol children in early childhood, to do well child checks, to check out needs for counselling. They have an alcohol and drug service and so on. Their premises were just not very far from the CTV building, which was the building that collapsed with the loss of 115 people in it. And so Tony's team, a not-for-profit organisation, were first on the ground. Can you see that? Yep. So there's Tony talking about the staff being the first on the scene to deal with the dreadful injuries and also the death that people. And he talked afterwards about how his staff took off their coats. It was a day a bit like today, but they took off their coats and to cover the bodies and give them some respect. Mary is the director at this stage of the Christchurch Methodist Mission, which provided a range of services. One of the services that they have is an elder care centre where they have independent living, and also a 4-storey facility providing hospital level care for geriatric patients. She was quite, Mary's pretty much one for understating, It was difficult, working for providing aged care services without power and water, and she really struggled to get that. Like Mary's own offices had also been, they weren't able to use their offices, and Mary was trying to organise power and water on her laptop and her cell phone sitting in her car because she didn't have an office to work from anymore. And because she wasn't a government agency, she found it really difficult. It was difficult in those first hours and days to contact the emergency services that could help her with this issue. Daryl from the Alzheimer's Society, she was saying they were really lucky they didn't lose their premises. But for the staff trying to work with people, particularly people with Alzheimer's need routine, they need familiarity. And that all changed, and also the carers had to make much more effort to go to the people because they couldn't be expected to find their way to services and such. Karen and Steve worked for the Mental Health Foundation, and they were just really great. They were running the All Right campaign, which some of you may have heard of, which promotes the 5 ways to wellbeing, which I can only ever remember 4, about keeping connected, learning something new, getting physical exercise, taking moments to appreciate the beauty in small things in life, and number 5's gone again. But that's been a really great campaign, kind of telling people that it's okay, you're all right if you're feeling really down to it, you're all right if you're feeling guilty, you're all right if you're feeling really lucky that you haven't had the impacts that some of your friends or family had. And this is pretty much true of a lot of the community organisations in Christchurch. We walked out of our buildings with nothing. We never salvaged anything, but people just kept on working. A lot of community organisations worked from home for a long time. We've had so many different moves. I think the Cross office has moved 5 times in 4 years. We're hoping we're in our forever home now. Tell me if I'm going too fast. I know we're the last people and you'd really like to go home, so I'm trying not to drag it out too long. Helen at Tenants Protection Association, there were enormous issues with tenancy. Landlords who wanted to have possession of their tenanted properties back for their own family members, tenants who needed to move out while repairs were being done, what was their tenancy status, what did they do if the landlord wasn't particularly interested in attending to the damage in their tenanted home, all sorts of issues. As we say, Helen's team lost their building. They moved into Helen's lounge for a year. 4 staff working off the dining room table. They eventually converted one of her spare room into a kind of an office. And so they had to get mobile to go out to the communities themselves where the damage was, which wasn't so easy because the roads were pretty munted. And it's a real mission getting around Christchurch at present. You really do not want to have a low-slung car, so people with the four-wheel drives were kind of laughing at the guys with their hot wheels. 7 Nat run White Elephant Trust, which is a youth service. When I say service, it's kind of a place for youth to hang out. Basically, they teach kids DJing skills, and they teach them how to run their own dance parties and how to take care of all the safety issues and the health issues and all that kind of stuff, so that the kids learn these skills about doing their own thing. Once again, lost their offices, lost their premises. Pretty hard running dance parties when you haven't got any premises. And we lost so many premises in the quakes. So these guys just got this mobile van and went around, and the kids came to the van to sort of learn their DJing skills and their turntable skills and stuff. They're now in a great new premises, and they're really up and running again. Mike runs Christchurch Community House, which was home to a lot of organisations, including Christchurch COS. Really great, lots of small groups, shared resources, lots of networking, supporting each other. You know, when you're just 1 or 2 staff, you can get pretty isolated, and this is a really great place to work. We lost Community House. We all kind of dispersed to our own homes or to other places where we could find temporary homes. And so Mike was really working hard to try and get the premises up and running again, because if people weren't working out of their own homes or cars, the new premises cost a lot more money. I like to say that the not-for-profit sector, we're the vulnerable tenants of the commercial sector. We hire the offices and premises that nobody else wants because they're in pretty run-down buildings quite often. And they were the ones that fell down in the quakes. And we don't have a kind of lower end of the commercial market anymore. So we're really wondering where we're all going to end up. We have a new community house now. We just moved in a few months ago. But the rents have gone up quite a bit, even though we're still subsidising it, because it's just so much more difficult now. Rex runs the Christchurch Migrant Centre, which supports a lot of cold communities. To get out and find the communities, he needed the eyes and ears around the city, and just really innovative and working with the Maori Wardens, which is a voluntary group. They're supported with grants from government, but the wardens themselves are all volunteers, and they are out on the streets and working with Maori who might have antisocial behaviours and so on, and kind of help, especially the kids, to sort of, they're like the aunties out there, guys, sort your act out and look after them. So these Maori wardens are really sensitive for all forms of cultural sensitivity, and they were great for being able to work with called communities and identify some of the issues. There were one of the issues was about getting information out to them, and what happened was that in Christchurch, a lot of called communities use Plains FM, our local community radio, and do programs in their own language, which would have been perfect, except that the studios were inside the city centre that got the cordon thrown around it and became part of the forbidden city where we couldn't go in. So the communities weren't able to go in and transmit the information that they needed to transmit out to their communities. And that's one of the issues touched on in a really good report that the Migrant Centre was part of, about how better to work with called communities in an emergency or disaster. I'm not sure if I've shared it with you, Bridget. I need to do that. Barry at the SPCA. The SPCA, of course, is a national body, but they were really hard at work looking after the animals that got separated from owners. And I've heard a few people talk about pets and the difficulties of encouraging people to leave homes in emergencies when they've got pets to care for. These guys, they had to rehome 800 animals. And I never knew it, but we had an animal rescue unit, an animal search and rescue, that was flying down from Wellington to help look for and rescue animals and reunite them with their owners, so their owners felt much more able to kind of move on. when Alexandra at Friends of Linwood Cemetery heard I was doing these interviews, she rang up and she said, "Oh, I want to be on these." And I'm going, "Well, I don't know, Alexandra, you know, the people in the cemetery weren't that really affected by these quakes. What have you got to talk about?" So she talked it through with me, and it was just amazing. I thought, right, yes, please come along and talk. And so that's what she talked about, the needs of people to kind of have that reflection and to connect with their ancestors who had immigrated to New Zealand and what they must have gone through and what connection they had with them. She also talked, because Linwood Cemetery is one of the oldest in Christchurch, and she was talking about how a lot of the buildings with the names of the early city founding fathers had fallen down, and the one place where their names was left was on the tombstones in the cemetery, so it was kind of our last physical connection with some of the history of the city. Celia at the School of Music, they were in the most beautiful old building, and it just next to the Catholic Cathedral, which you might have seen on TV. It's sort of fallen down a bit. And so, yeah, beautiful old building, and that fell down, and a lot of their staff was sort of in there at the time, lost musical instruments. Whoa, what happened then? Sorry about that, I'll just have to flick through quickly. She talked about how important it was just to get back on track again, and how important that healing ability of music is. They were supported really well by various schools who made their assembly halls or classrooms available for them on the weekend to be able to organise, people were sort of travelling around the city to be able to go to venues where their kids could get back into their music. The New Brighton Community Gardens. New Brighton is in the east. It's a fairly low socio-economic area, and it was one of the areas hit hardest by the quakes. And they've got the most beautiful community gardens there, which fortunately weren't damaged. And this is the role that they were able to provide for people. This is where we got the title from the book from. It's something that would actually grow that sense of hope and stability. So our book was about holding hope together, because that's what all our groups are doing. They're holding hope together with their communities. And she was saying the numbers just skyrocket about people coming in and wanting to talk. And you're turning over your problems while you're turning over the dirt. It's just, she said it was just a really great community place. And then finally, ROS, Community Networks Aotearoa, which up until recently was the New Zealand Council of Social Services. I rang ROS because they were really able to support us by, even in the first immediate, after when we'd evacuated from our buildings. And of course the phone systems weren't working because they were in overload, but people were actually able to call people from out of Christchurch, which was really weird. So I rang Community Networks Aotearoa because I couldn't ring my own family because the calls weren't going through. I said, "Can you please find out if my family are okay? Here's their numbers." And so they were able to call back and say, "Yep, you're all good. It's fine to go home. You don't need to hang around in town looking for them." And then also they came down as part of the response to see what they can do. They helped organise office furniture. A lot of community organisations had no office furniture because it was left in their offices that they weren't allowed to get back into. So they didn't have desks or filing cabinets or anything like that, and they were able to get a shipment down to us. And to conclude with Roz's Roz's thoughts on it, it's about us all pulling together, because it's the small community groups looking out for everyone that really made the difference. So that's our story. Thank you very much. I do have about 4 or 5 copies of the box. I only couldn't bring too many because I was travelling cabin baggage only, and it's a 7K limit. We'd love to have a donation if you'd like to have them. $10 would be great. If you want to give more, I won't complain. If you can't manage $10, well, I'm quite happy to accept any donation you might like if you'd like a copy. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Sharon?
Hello, Sharon. from City Council, Steve. I just wanted to ask, how was it in terms of community organisations working together, pre and post? What difference was there?
Right.
This is probably sort of silver lining.
Christchurch is quite a well-networked city in terms of community organisations, and we also had a really good relationship. The City Council has always had a strong community team, community, what do they call themselves these days? Strengthening Communities Advisors, and they were really, really great. So we had excellent relationship with them. We faced some challenges from the direction coming down from above to the community teams of what they were able to get involved in and what was not, because of negotiations going on around between central and local government on who was going to pay for what. And so there was nervousness about committing budget to things. It got quite controversial around the perception that City Council only wanted to work on business as usual, which was an unfortunate turn of phrase that the CEO there used. So things got a bit tricky around that, and it was, and I know the staff were champing to get out there, but they had to kind of work through the hierarchy to get permission. The sector themselves, actually one of the real great things that had happened prior to the quake was there was this message from government that, you know, there was too many groups out there, too much duplication of services, all that kind of stuff. So the service providers in Christchurch that had government contracts had done a project to identify, without giving individual circumstances, they managed to code all their clients and their waiting lists, and they were able to compare and find out that actually there wasn't a lot of overlap. And so they'd already sort of developed this way of working together to refer clients on when they did have waiting lists. And that became the government's kind of response. So there was an 0800 number created, which was called Right Service, Right Time. And the people who phoned that number connected into this network, and they were able to refer them to whichever agency had the vacancy. So that was really great that it had just happened to have been a project that left them in a great state to pick that up.
Any more questions? Thank you so much, Sharon. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. I forgot. I will never be forgiven. Can I please just receive a message? This is from the Mayor of Christchurch, Leanne Dalziel, and she just asked me to bring this message. She says, in March I was part of a government delegation that attended the Third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, Japan. I was invited to present 2 working sessions on the conference, Risk Identification and Assessment and Disaster Risk Management for Healthy Societies. In my presentation, I said that while in the preparedness stage, we're very good at preparing for the response and the immediate aftermath of a disaster. In my experience, there was nothing to prepare us for what happens next, the recovery. In my view, it's all about building resilience before, during, and after the event. The greater the resilience, measured in a community sense by things like social capital, the more rapid the response and the quicker and more enduring the recovery, which in itself builds resilience. Resilience helps us prepare, respond, and to recover more quickly. I commend you on your useful work to examine the impact of emergencies on vulnerable people and how we can respond to the specific needs of disadvantaged people after a disaster. I look forward to hearing the lessons and outcomes of the 2015 Emergency Management Forum. Okay.